We're so delighted to welcome Dr. Mary Hanson-Zalot. Hi, Dr. Mary. Thanks so much
Hi.
for today.
Of course, my pleasure.
Then could you tell us your professional background and your current role in nursing?
Oh, sure. Presently, I am an Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at Thomas Jefferson University, the Jefferson College of Nursing. And in that role, I'm responsible for academic programming across the spectrum, from the baccalaureate through the master's to the Doctor of Nursing practice level. I'm also responsible overall for seeing that the resources are sufficient to provide the curriculum to the students. So that translates into overseeing faculty, the full-time faculty of the College of Nursing, as well as the adjunct faculty. And the final area where I have a lot of participation is in the area of student affairs. So any type of a student affairs issue that should arise. One of the other elements of my role is that I interface with the various departments across the university to really facilitate both the experience for the student as well as the faculty member at Jefferson. So that is my current role. In terms of my background, I earned a bachelor's degree from Holy Family University, which was a very small faith-based four-year institution in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia area, and began my career as a med-surg nurse once I graduated from school, and quickly decided that I wanted to try my hand at critical care nursing. So I moved from an inner city hospital environment out to a large suburban institution with a trauma center. And then it was there that I learned trauma nursing and stayed in that for a few years. I also had developed a passion for working with oncology patients at the time, and that prompted me to go back to school for a master's degree in oncology at one of the area colleges in Pennsylvania as well. And then finally, I earned my doctoral degree down at Widener University, and my area of specialization in that is higher education academic leadership. So it's an ADD, a doctorate in education.
I've heard that you're kind of involved in the International Society of Nurses and Genetics. Could you tell me more about
Yeah,
that?
sure. They really are a very large organization that spans across the world. And my interest in genetics obviously was developed because of my passion for oncology nursing. So at the time, I've been a nurse since 1982. So at the time, such little information was so known about genetics. And when I would teach cancer nursing to students and I would talk about the pathophysiology of disease and the emergence of a cancer state, I always would try to talk to the students about the fact that, the DNA in the cells is so critically important, and, environmental influences, et cetera, can really wreak havoc. But in any event, I became interested and was fortunate enough to be able to go to a conference a couple years ago that ISONG had actually sponsored. And there I met a lot of educators across the country and across the world who are also passionate about genetics. I don't have the vast clinical knowledge of genetics, but I do have a passion for the education of nurses. So I was very interested in learning how do we incorporate genetics and genomics into our nursing curriculum at all levels, the baccalaureate through the doctoral level, because if we really want to talk about precision healthcare, we really need to understand better the genomics and the epigenetics that present. We need to understand how social determinants can impact or, kind of wake up, problematic areas in a person's body that can then go on to lead to chronic illness. So in any event, that is my area of interest. So I'm very new to that organization, and I was very fortunate that they had asked me to represent the education subcommittee for that organization. So I'm working with somebody in one of the northern schools to be able to chair that group. So I'm learning as I go. Primarily, the organization itself is a mixture of people who have passion for clinical genetics and genomics, researchers, and then educators. So I'm very much novice to the group, but I find that it's a very, very important initiative, and I'm really very excited to be able to integrate more content into our curriculum at Jefferson.
Thank you so much. As I was hearing your talk, like I noticed that you're currently working specifically in the education area with nursing students.
Yes.
Um, so with this current really challenging time with this COVID-19 pandemic, like, the medias are like really focusing on frontline nurses who are in the bedside, but I believe like nursing students are also being affected by those pandemic. And from your education perspective, how do you think the pandemic has impacted like perceptions of nursing as a potential career path for especially young people or nursing students?
Well, I do think that the pandemic certainly has posed its challenges. And one of the things that without the pandemic, if we set the pandemic aside, one of the things that we have always tried to instill in our nursing student population is the ability to be flexible and to be resilient. And when the pandemic really emerged powerfully in the United States, it caused us to almost hit pause. And by March of 2020, we were actually transitioning our students to remote learning environments, to virtual learning environments. Now, our baccalaureate student population is typically has face-to-face instruction. They do go to the clinical areas very early in their academic career as a nursing student. Our master's student and our doctoral level students, they're primarily remote, but especially the master's students, will have some engagement sessions on our campus in the form of intensives where they come together with their cohort of students and they learn skills and they hear from individuals. We engage in activities that they would not be able to do virtually in a different setting. So with that said, when we hit that transition, many of the students had to stop participating in their clinical experiences because the agencies either weren't able to manage the student population along with their own patient populations, their own nursing staff. There were questions about PPE, et cetera. So in order to accommodate all those changes that were rapidly occurring, our students did not engage in clinical activities for a couple weeks. And then by, I would say, early to midsummer, we were back, integrating our students back in. So I do think that the pandemic has almost affirmed for students that they have made a good decision by choosing nursing as a career or a field that they want to advance in, as an advanced practice nurse. It has been very, very challenging. Many, many years ago, I had heard a statement that someone used to use from an area college. The statement was, if you save one person's life, you're called a hero. But if you save many lives, you're called a nurse. And I'll never forget that statement. And I don't know where the individual had heard it, but I thought how powerful and how realistic, because the nurses sometimes don't even know the benefit that a patient derives from an interaction, or the family, working with families or communities. So I do think that even though it has been a terrible situation, we're trying to navigate the pandemic, and the lives lost have been so significant. But the silver lining, I think, is that there is definitely a committed workforce. I do think that the nurses that are on the front lines, that are actively working, they've been challenged. They've really been challenged, and they need our support. And we've been trying to do that. Several of the faculty are working with active practitioners now, just to provide that time to listen, to hear, to help them to review that experience, what it's been like. But I think that a lot of the nursing workforce and our students have been steadfast. We have not seen students say, I'm changing my career because of this. We have not really seen that in our experience. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing that powerful quote. Like it really strikes me too.
right?
Yeah, in terms of like curriculum design, like from this transition from, hands-on experience to online, how was it like?
Okay, so actually, that's a great question because many of our educators that provide education at the higher levels, the master's and the doctoral levels, they were very fluent in online course delivery. And the baccalaureate faculty, the individuals that are engaged with teaching the students at that level, because they were face to face, they certainly knew how to use and leverage technology and audio visual equipment in the classroom and whatnot. But this whole transition, um, it just became so much more intense and it was so quick. I will have to say that if we decided that we were going remote on a Friday, by Monday, the faculty was ready. Like they were prepared. We had designed some activities in case-based learning for students. We still were able to do clinical virtually with students because we had adjunct instructors working with students in smaller groups to move through cases so that they really did keep up their studies. And in addition to that, we had a very intense faculty development offering to us that lasted about the equivalent of a full semester. And what had happened in that faculty development programming is that we all underwent a series of workshops to be able to do online delivery more effectively and to set up platforms more consistently. So to very much empower faculty as well as students and benefit them so that they had some consistent expectations of where to find things on a course board or how information would be communicated to them on a course board. So that has been very, very beneficial. Now I think that the students are actually, and faculty, they're in the phase now of almost like they're enjoying it because they know that the rich variety of activities that they can pull together are incredible. Yeah.
Thank you for
Cool.
sharing.
And our
Yeah.
students are still now in the clinical environment. They're back taking
Mhm.
care of patients in the hospital setting, the community settings. If those settings are opened, they have started to engage in a lot of telehealth activities. So by and large, we have done so much in terms of really looking for additional opportunities.
I would like to ask another question. This might be a little quite big question, but I assume like, this pandemic is not about just professional issues, but it's more about the whole society and also policy. From your perspective, how can nurses get more involved with nursing advocacy and like more influencing policymakers and legislators? Like, what has experience been like?
Well,
Could you
we
share?
have a lot of faculty down at Jefferson that are very interested in policy, and I would say that they are expert at policy. Now, in terms of how do we get students, nursing students, excited about policy? How do we introduce them to policy? I think that it's really building incremental knowledge throughout a curriculum, throughout a course of study. So therefore, with that said, what we do is we try to build in components throughout the undergraduate curriculum that then become the platform for future learning, especially at the master's and the doctoral level. And the policy classes, actually at the higher levels, will engage students in a variety of activities that include advocacy. Some of our professional nursing classes at the baccalaureate level will have students selecting an issue and trying to write to a representative, like, to be able to articulate their concern about the issue or support from an issue, about an issue. From my own experience, because it's not ever been an area that had expertise in, what I have done is I've joined our local chapter of the Oncology Nursing Society. And in that local chapter, I serve as the legislative liaison, which then helps me to become a little bit more immersed in that policy type of information and then share it with my colleagues. Because I really do think that the best way to learn something is when you have to teach it to someone. You really do have to have a grounded understanding of it, a fundamental understanding to be able to articulate it to someone else. So that has been very, very beneficial. And of course, in the area of oncology nursing, advocacy is critically important, because they are such a vulnerable population of patients that we see.
It's so interesting that, you incorporate those advocacy competencies into the curriculum design so that, students can learn from the earlier stages before going to the front line as well.
And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be like when you're trying to teach about the role of advocacy with our nursing student population, it doesn't have to be an enormous activity that's designed for them to capture it. Taking 8 students to a clinical setting, undergraduate students, and saying to a student, okay, in post-conference today, at the end of the day, what I want you to do is be able to come together and discuss one thing that you saw that represented what you interpret as a nurse advocating for a patient, a family, a staff nurse, a colleague, someone from another health discipline. It doesn't have to be an enormous activity, but it gets a student to think, wow, advocacy is not just about patients, but it's about the healthcare team, and it's about people that you interact with along the way.
Yeah, that's a great tip because when thinking of advocacy at an enormous level, like I get really overwhelmed. Like, what is like that? But if you like narrow it down like that, it's like more, it resonates to like personal issues, and yeah, it should be really helpful. Thank you for sharing. Um, then my last question is like, how do you see the nursing field changing in the next 5 to 10 years?
I do think that in 5 to 10 years, there will be positions that don't exist today. There'll be positions for nurses. I think that the opportunities for establishing a career in a new lane will be endless. I think that we'll become a lot more innovative. We'll find ourselves working in areas that we never imagined. I do think that I know that we talk about an international nursing shortage, but I think that our pipeline hopefully will be infused with people that are very, very passionate about what it is they want to aspire to in terms of providing nursing care, not just for their local area, but for their country across the world. I do think that we're going to see a lot more international engagement. I think that nurses have really kind of rolled up their sleeves and they do want to tackle the real problems. They really do want to be part of decision making. And they see the health outcomes that we need to address, right? So I do think that the opportunities will be endless. I think that it's an exciting time to be a nurse. No one ever expected to be in a pandemic. It's just not something that you learn the first year of nursing school, how to manage in a pandemic. They don't really bring that to the fore because we didn't really have to. And across time, you learn as you go, right? So now look at all the information and look at all we can provide now to the next generation coming through the ranks of what we learned.
Yeah, thank you for your powerful message. Like, I'm so moved. Finally, could you give us a message to nursing students and nurses who will become the future leaders in the society?
I would just say stay passionate, be very open, listen, learn as much as you can, read as much as you can. I think that does help to develop one's repertoire and one's interests. To me, nursing has never felt like work. I could say every job that I've ever had hasn't really felt like work. It hasn't been burdensome in any fashion. And I think that I've been so fortunate, and I hope that that's the case for nurses that come through, the nurses come up, the up and coming generation. My hope is that they can have the same joy. I mean, it's an honor to be a nurse. I really do feel that at my very core, I feel that I am so honored to be a nurse. And I just hope that for subsequent generations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mary.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome.